Hello and welcome to another episode of Devo's Straight Dope. I'm Devo. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Or as I'm starting to call it, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Lie. And this is what I mean by that. So, back in 2007, George W. Bush, and no matter what you think of whatever you think of the guy, by starting the process for this loan forgiveness program, that's one good thing that he did. I'm going to leave it there. Started the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, So, the thing is, with this loan forgiveness program, which began with George W. Bush, but was officially signed by President Barack Obama, this program recognized how you have so many people. We're now in a government which basically says you have to go to college. You have to get a bachelor's degree or sometimes a master's degree to get a decent job. So, because the factories are now in other countries, because these corporation owners have decided to become traitors to the American people, sending factories overseas. But that's a personal beef, which isn't very personal, because I know a lot of people know how I feel, and you may feel the same way. So because so many of the factory jobs and the call center jobs have gone to other countries, these days, unless you have a special skill, just having a high school diploma isn't enough. You have to have some college degree. So, for instance, even though a lot of what I do only really requires a bachelor's degree, in order to be considered for a position, I had to have a master's degree. Well, that in a car. So, there we go. Sorry. So because of that, what happened is I had to, what many of us did, because the government signed an act, and that makes it law, that says you have to work in a public service, non-governmental and non-for-profit agency. Well, actually, CrossFit, it has to be not-for-profit or the government or something like that. But if it's like a for-profit agency, that doesn't count. And so it could be something like a nurse, social worker like me. Also, something like public aid, working there, or in a community-based program, things like that. So, in order to qualify for that, you'd have to work full-time for one of these types of employment for 10 years, and in those 10 years make 10 qualified payments towards your student loans. So many of us have made a lot of life decisions based on this law. And here's the interesting thing. When it was signed into law in 2009, I kept going to the government website to see how I could apply for this. And so what happened was it just gave those basic rules, but it didn't say anything else. It said that you had to work for nonprofit or doing some kind of public service work for 10 years, 10 full-time years, and during that time you have to make sure that you get a payment. Or I'm sorry, in those 10 years, make sure that you make 120 qualified payments. And these are non-consecutive, but 120 qualified payments. That's all the U.S. Department of Education would say. And I would keep checking. It wouldn't give me anything on how to apply. So for a while, since it didn't have any type of application process, I thought that's all you needed to do. But then after a while, I started getting suspicious. Then in about, I think, 2012, there was this new law which privatized student loan financing. And as a result, my loan went from the government agency direct loan to Great Lakes. And so I stayed with them for a few years, but then I noticed back in late 2016, I started to get suspicious. So I had contacted Great Lakes and explained my concerns and what I wanted to do. And they said, oh, well, sorry, but we don't work with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. If you want to do that, then you have to transfer your account to FedLoan. So I said, fine. FedLoan was another, don't let the name fool you. It's privatized loan servicing. So I said, fine. So it took a while, but in 2017, I was finally transferred to FedLoan, and I had a million questions, but these people, they gave an email option since I hate making phone calls. I tried several times sending messages and then calling them, and when I would ask a question, they'll say, oh, let me get back to you, and they never would. So after a while, I got tired of waiting, and I demanded to speak to a supervisor, and I was finally able to get through to someone with my questions. So they had said, they'd given me this one payment, and so they said, oh, but if you want the public service loan forgiveness, well, that's what I said I wanted from day one. Then they put me on another plan, and then that was that. So after a while, I didn't hear anything from them. They asked for another employment verification form. Allegedly, they need one every year. So what happened was, in 2018, after they processed my second employment verification form, verifying where I work, the type of workplace it is, how long I've been there, and how many payments I've made since my time there. So then I had asked them, okay, I know my time is getting close, so I need to ask, how many more payments do I have? So October of 2018, I get a message saying that I made 0 of 120 qualified payments. And that was absurd, because I knew I had made at close to 100. So I had explained myself, and I had said that can't be right. I've been paying into this for all this time. I did everything everyone told me to do. So they said, okay, we'll check into it. Then they said in November, okay, you've got 3 payments. And I'm like, okay, so you've gone from 0 to 3. And this is supposed to be progress? No. So I spoke to a supervisor, and they put my file under investigation, just to see, like under review. And then they said, oh, our mistake. You have 13 of 120 payments. This is Fed loan. So things started to get really ridiculous. So after contacting them back and forth, calling them, emailing them, I had enough. So I contacted them. Like the loan management section of the U.S. Department of Education. I forget what they call that. And what they did was they had they looked into it, and they had said the reason why, well, actually Fed Loan said this also, but it didn't make any sense. They had said that the reason why they were saying I didn't make any qualifying payments is because all of my payments were graduated payments or standard payments or things like that, while they were supposed to be the type of payment that they said that was a qualified payment. So it took them almost 10 years to tell me what kind of payment is a qualified payment. And they said it was income-based. Well, I've been asking questions all of these years, trying to find out information. This is supposed to be like the best form of government in the free world. Well, it's not as free anymore, but that's another story. So if that's the case, it's really concerning. But the good news is, I'm not the only one who has had this experience. According to news sources, starting in 2017, because actually, maybe I got the dates wrong, because there were people who qualified for the PSLF program since 2007. So 2017, people started going, or they started to apply for, to get their loans forgiven, and so of all of those who had said, oh, I did everything I was supposed to, I guess my loans are forgiven, right? 99% of the cases, these loan servicers and representatives of our government said no. So out of thousands of cases, there was a 1% chance that you actually did qualify for the public service loan forgiveness program. And because of that, there are people who have been suing their loan servicers. There have been lawsuits against Fed Loan. Not only this, but mismanagement of people's loans. But no one told us, those who, the 1%, those are the quote-unquote lucky ones who had an income-based plan all along. But for 99% of us, we're sitting around twiddling our thumbs and sending messages calling to find out what, besides making 120 payments, besides making those payments while working full-time, besides making those payments while working full-time in public service. So, but we have 3, but that 4th qualification is it has to be income-based. Well, our government and our media sources did not say what is qualified. And in fact, the only way we could find out what's qualified or not is when we go to try to get what belongs to us, what was promised to us. So some people have been suing their loan servicers, and in fact, in 2018, this has become such an issue, especially considering how, like so many people with student loans, how that's hurting the economy. Our current president, Donald Trump, and yes, you can call him what you want, but he is our president whether you like it or not. I don't agree with a lot of the things that he stands for. I don't agree with how he enunciates those things that he stands for, but he's our president, and that's that. He did, like, what he actually did was, he had signed this one act. I forget the name of it. When I find the name of it, I'll add it in the comment section. He signed an act which provided a fund of $350 million for those who otherwise would not have qualified for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program because they had the wrong payment plan. So our president, that's his way of acknowledging, you know what? This government deceived the people. This government, like, even if they meant to, this government failed the people. So here is something to make up for that. So say what you want, but there are a few things about Donald Trump that I approve of, and this is one of them. If you don't like me for saying, for being able to acknowledge that there are certain things about him that are respectable, laudable, or at least acknowledgeable, well then, you're not very open-minded, are you? You'll just believe anything that the corrupted Democratic Party and maybe the Republican Party isn't so much better, but face it, the Democratic Party is corrupt. It only cares about those who are considered underdogs, those who are considered, who or even will try to make themselves out as outcasts. Like if it's true or false. But they only believe in standing up for the rights and the values of a select few. And to an extent, the Republican Party does too. But at least the Republican Party, at least most supporters of the Republican Party don't go around ruining the lives of people who disagree with them. But I digress. So, if you are so obsessed with the quote-unquote virtue of the Democratic Party and the accuracy and fairness of CNN, then honestly, you need to look into the mirror and ask yourself, what makes you open-minded. Because the traditional definition of open-mindedness is being able to at least listen to someone else's viewpoint. If you can't listen to the viewpoint of other people, then your attitude is a part of what's wrong with this country. There, I said it. So you can send me a lot of angry messages. You can unfriend me on Facebook. Do what you want. But I said it. I'm sticking with it. But again, I digress. So, $350 million. But as the Fed loan representative, and also as the United States Department of Education representative told me, is that, well, they told me that I should qualify for this particular fund by November of 2020. Now that but what she did make clear is that even if I qualify it, I can only get loan forgiveness as long as that fund is still intact. So that means if my qualification for that fund, like if by the time I can draw from that fund for loan forgiveness and there's no more money, I'm screwed. So that's why, and sure, it's very possible and very likely that by November 2020, there'll still be millions of dollars, or at least just as much as I need to finally get this loan forgiven. There is a possibility of that. So, but again, when it comes to the government, don't hang your lives on maybe. Because who knows, maybe we might have a major war on, God forbid, and we might have to draw from that fund. I would hope not. Or maybe there's someone in charge of that fund who's guilty of fraud, and they siphon those funds into other programs, or maybe into their bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Who knows? So, there is a real possibility that even by 2020, I couldn't get my loans forgiven through that fund anyway. So that's why I'm starting to look into my legal options. I'm not a rich man. I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford an attorney. But one thing I would recommend is, if you live in northern Illinois and you've been screwed just like me, then send me a private message. We need to talk. Yep, send me a private message because we need to talk. Also, if you're in the Chicagoland area and you're actually screwed just like me, and you are actually taking a part in a class action lawsuit, then I need to ask you for a favor. Please let me know if I could join that class action lawsuit, because I want in. Like, I'll contribute what I can afford to, but actually, by me joining your class action lawsuit, even if you're not in the Chicagoland area, if your attorney can work with people in other states, and you're in another state, please do me a favor. Send me a private message with your name, with the name of the law firm you're using and their phone number. And what I'll do is I'll call them and I will ask if I can join the class action lawsuit. Because, my friends, there's strength in numbers. If enough people are suing the Department of Education or suing FedLoan, we are sending a statement out which says we're not stupid, we have been cheated, and as American citizens, we're not going to take it anymore. So let's send that message together, because we didn't create this country the way it is. When we were growing up, well, assuming that you're in, like, you're Gen X, Gen Y, or Gen Z, we were growing up when this country, when CEOs in this country decided to close down American factories or call centers and open them in other countries to earn more profit. So we had no choice in the matter. Even our parents had no choice in this matter. Like, many of our parents worked extra hard for these companies, and the company's way of thanking them is by taking their job and giving it to someone outside the country, a place where the cost of living is a lot lower. So it's not our fault that in order to get a decent job, high school just doesn't cut it anymore, unless you're doing menial work, or not menial, but like manual labor. So it's not our fault that our economy and our workforce is no longer dependent on just a high school diploma. I weep for the times when a man with a high school diploma or an associate's degree, regular meat and potatoes guy, can get married, have 2 children, have a pension, a house, a car, maybe 2, can retire at 65, and can do all the traveling they want, and either have a 401k or a pension, and they're not completely dependent on Social Security. And they're even saying that the payments I make towards Social Security now are probably just paying for our parents and grandparents. We're probably paying, or older brothers and sisters, and that we're paying into something that we can't benefit from. That's not our fault. We're not the ones who voted for, well, most of us aren't the ones who were, who voted for politicians who said one thing and did the other. Like, we didn't vote for politicians that closed down factories in Michigan, creating poverty in that area. These days, you have 2 people with full-time jobs that require college diplomas, and you have those 2 people with student loans to pay back, because once people realized that you needed a college education to become that you need a college education to make a decent living, then the prices skyrocketed within a generation. That's not our fault. We grew up in this system the way it was, and we did our best to make the best out of a sucky situation. And many of us work hard, but even with our education and our and our knowledge, our diplomas, we see some friends who barely graduated high school, and some of them are doing better than us because they're able to save money even though they were earning less than us. And then you have two educated people who have to, they can barely afford a child. That is the America that we live in, people. We didn't create it. We just inherited it. So, a nation that forces us to, I'll give you another example. There was a time when a person, once they turned 18, graduate high school, they could move out of their parents' houses. They can get an apartment, decent apartment, full-time job, and still do pretty well for themselves. But now, thanks to mounting student loan and debt that most, especially millennials, have, you have 30-year-olds still living at home. And it's not their fault. What are they going to do? They have this mounting student loan debt, because we feel that in order to really make something out of ourselves, we felt the need to go to college to make something for ourselves and for our families. So, as a result of them going to college and having all these student loans to pay off, the jobs that they get with these loans, which are entry level, it'll take them a long time before they can make a livable wage while they still have the student loans to pay off. So you have lower end or even mid-level professionals, 30 years old, still living with their parents, still living with their families. No wonder so many millennials have such a hard time growing up, because the government and the way that the economy was shaped doesn't allow American kids to grow up. Well, we can't put a stop to it right away, but we can at least put a stop to it by making sure that the government honors its promise and does not punish us for their misinformation. So, if you're with me, send a message. If you're in the middle of a class action lawsuit yourself, send a message, please. But it's time to take a stand. It's time to let the government know that we're putting our feet down, and we're doing it now. I'm out.